The skull was one of the largest skulls ever discovered belonging to a species in the Homo genus, and it falls within the range of Neanderthal and Homo sapiens skulls. Actually even bigger than some of the Homo heidelbergensis skulls, and this was actually corroborated by anthropologist Chris Stringer.
Scientists are staring at genome data that shouldn't exist. The numbers on their screens break every rule of human evolution they've spent decades learning. This isn't Neanderthal DNA. It's not Denisovan, and it's definitely not modern human. It belongs to something called the Dragon Man. The skull was massive, bigger than any human brain case on record. The brow ridges were thicker than a Neanderthal's. The face was built like a fortress. And when they finally mapped its genome, they discovered something that rewrites the entire human family tree. This lineage isn't fully human, and it survived way longer than it should have. The story starts in 1933 in northeastern China, when a construction worker found something impossible buried in the banks of the Songhua River. The skull he pulled from the mud was enormous, clearly human, but wrong in every way that mattered. But this was wartime China. The worker, fearing the Japanese occupation forces would seize his discovery, wrapped the skull and hid it at the bottom of a well. It stayed there for nearly 90 years. When the skull finally surfaced in 2018, scientists couldn't believe what they were looking at. The brain case measured 1,420 cubic centimeters, larger than the average modern human brain. The brow ridges jutted out like a prehistoric cliff face. The eye sockets were massive, square, and built for a face that belonged in a museum of human ancestors, not something this recent. They named it Homo longi, the Dragon Man. The dating results hit like a bombshell. Using uranium series analysis and stratigraphic evidence, they pinned the skull between 138,000 and 309,000 years old. That put Dragon Man squarely in the time period when early modern humans were supposedly taking over the world. But Dragon Man didn't look like he was going extinct. He looked like he was thriving. The skull showed no signs of malnutrition, disease, or trauma. This wasn't some evolutionary dead end, struggling to survive. The bone structure suggested a robust, healthy individual who lived in a successful population. The facial architecture indicated advanced hunting capabilities and cold adaptation, traits that would have made Dragon Man incredibly effective in northern Asia. Scientists tried to fit him into existing categories. Maybe he was a late Neanderthal variant, maybe an early Denisovan, maybe just an unusually robust modern human. Every classification attempt failed. The skull was too advanced to be purely archaic, but too primitive to be modern. It had the brain volume of a genius and the brow ridges of our earliest ancestors. The combination shouldn't exist. That's when they decided to extract DNA from the ancient bone. What they found in that genome would prove even more shocking than the skull itself. The preliminary genetic analysis revealed something unprecedented. Dragon Man represented a completely unknown branch of the human family tree. Not a variant, not a hybrid, a distinct lineage that had been evolving separately for over 1 million years. And somehow, nobody knew it existed. The DNA extraction from Dragon Man's skull took months of painstaking work. Ancient bone doesn't give up its secrets easily, especially when it's been buried for over 100,000 years. But the team managed to recover enough nuclear genome data to run a full phylogenetic analysis. What they found changed everything we thought we knew about human evolution. The divergence time hit them first. Dragon Man's lineage split from Homo sapiens roughly 1 million years ago, long before Neanderthals branched off around 600,000 years ago. This wasn't some late-stage human variant. This was an entirely separate evolutionary path that had been running parallel to our own for 1 million years. But here's where it gets crazy. When they compared Dragon Man's genome to known human lineages, he didn't match any of them. He wasn't Neanderthal, the genetic distance was too great. He wasn't modern human. The differences were fundamental, not superficial. Most shocking of all, he showed a stronger genetic affinity to Denisovans than to us. But he wasn't Denisovan either. The gene flow patterns told an incredible story. While Neanderthals interbred extensively with early modern humans, leaving genetic traces in virtually every non-African population today, Dragon Man showed minimal introgression with Homo sapiens. His lineage had remained largely separate, evolving in isolation across northern Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. The scientists staring at this data realized they were looking at evidence of a fourth major human lineage, not 3 branches of the human family tree, but 4. Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and now Dragon Man, all evolving simultaneously, all developing their own unique adaptations, all competing for the same landscapes. But the genetic data revealed something even more disturbing. Dragon Man's brain volume was larger than modern humans, yet his genome showed markers for advanced cognitive development that paralleled our own. This wasn't a primitive ancestor struggling with basic survival. This was a sophisticated human species with capabilities that might have rivaled Homo sapiens. The morphological genetic mismatch was unprecedented in human evolution research. Advanced brain development coupled with robust, archaic facial features. Modern cognitive markers in an ancient-looking skull. It was like finding a Ferrari engine in a Model T Ford. The scientific community's reaction was immediate and intense. Peer reviewers demanded additional verification. Conferences buzzed with heated debates. Some researchers questioned whether the genome data could be trusted. Others wondered if Dragon Man represented just the tip of an iceberg. How many other unknown human lineages were hiding in museum collections or undiscovered fossil sites? The implications for the out-of-Africa model were staggering. If Dragon Man's lineage had been evolving separately in Asia for 1 million years, it meant human evolution wasn't a simple story of modern humans replacing archaic ones. It was a complex web of parallel evolution, occasional interbreeding, and multiple sophisticated human species sharing the same planet. Dragon Man's genome had revealed something science wasn't prepared to accept. Human evolution was far messier, far more complex, and far more recent than anyone had imagined. But the real mystery wasn't Dragon Man's origins. It was how his lineage had survived so long, and what that survival meant for our understanding of human dominance. Dragon Man's genome revealed a timeline that should have been impossible. His lineage wasn't just surviving alongside early Homo sapiens, it was thriving. The genetic markers showed a population that had adapted to harsh northern climates, developed sophisticated hunting strategies, and maintained stable communities across vast stretches of Asia. The survival timeline was the first clue something was wrong with our models. Dragon Man lived between 138,000 and 309,000 years ago, overlapping directly with the emergence of anatomically modern humans in Africa. While our ancestors were just beginning to develop the tools and social structures that would eventually carry them across the globe, Dragon Man's people had already been perfecting their own survival strategies for hundreds of thousands of years. The geographic distribution suggested something even more remarkable. Dragon Man wasn't an isolated population clinging to survival in some remote corner of Asia. The genetic diversity patterns indicated a widespread presence across northern China, possibly extending into Siberia and Central Asia. This was a successful human species, with established territories, trade networks, and cultural continuity spanning millennia. Cold adaptation genes told the story of a lineage built for survival in environments that would have challenged even the most prepared modern humans. Dragon Man's genome showed markers for enhanced fat metabolism, improved circulation in extremities, and physiological changes that would have made Arctic survival not just possible, but comfortable. While early Homo sapiens were still learning to control fire consistently, Dragon Man's people were already masters of Ice Age living. The hunting and tool-making capabilities inferred from genetic markers painted a picture of sophisticated predators. Muscle attachment sites on the skull suggested powerful jaw muscles capable of processing tough, raw meat. Brain regions associated with spatial reasoning and hand-eye coordination showed development patterns that would have supported complex tool manufacture and use. But here's where the Dragon Man story connects to an even bigger mystery. Remember those Denisovans, the ghost population scientists discovered through DNA analysis of a finger bone from Siberia? The ones who left genetic traces in modern populations but almost no fossil evidence? Dragon Man's genome showed a stronger affinity to Denisovans than to any other known human lineage. Not identical, but close enough to suggest these populations were interacting, interbreeding, and possibly even merging in some regions of ancient Asia. The possibility that Dragon Man represents the actual face of the mysterious Denisovan DNA changes everything. For years, scientists have been finding Denisovan genetic signatures in modern Asian and Oceanian populations without knowing what these ancient humans actually looked like. Dragon Man's robust skull, massive brain case, and cold-adapted features might finally be showing us the people behind the DNA. Unassigned genetic signatures in living populations suddenly started making sense. Modern Tibetans carry high-altitude adaptation genes that don't match any known human ancestor. Aboriginal Australians have DNA markers that seem to come from nowhere. Pacific Islander populations show genetic diversity that suggests multiple waves of ancient human migration and interbreeding. Dragon Man's genome provided a potential source for these mystery genes. His lineage had the geographic distribution, the survival timeline, and the genetic diversity to account for unexplained DNA signatures scattered across modern populations. Evidence of sophisticated cognitive abilities rivaled anything seen in early Homo sapiens. The brain volume wasn't just larger, it was organized differently, with expanded regions associated with memory, spatial reasoning, and social coordination. Dragon Man's people weren't just surviving, they were innovating, adapting, and possibly even outcompeting other human species in their territories. Which raises the ultimate question: if Dragon Man's lineage was so successful, so well adapted, and so cognitively advanced, why did they disappear while we survived? The answer forces us to reconsider everything we think we know about what makes a human species human. The Dragon Man genome forced scientists to completely redraw the human family tree. What they thought was a simple three-way split between Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans was actually a four-way evolutionary explosion that happened over 1 million years ago. The timeline reconstruction showed something unprecedented in human evolution research. 4 distinct human lineages weren't just evolving separately, they were evolving in parallel, developing their own unique solutions to the same survival challenges across different continents. Homo sapiens took the path of social cooperation and tool innovation in Africa. Neanderthals became the cold-adapted hunters of Europe. Denisovans spread across Asia and developed high-altitude survival strategies. And Dragon Man? Dragon Man became something else entirely. A robust, large-brained lineage that dominated northern Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. The comparative analysis revealed just how different these lineages had become. Dragon Man's brain volume averaged 1,420 cubic centimeters, larger than modern humans, larger than Neanderthals, larger than any known human ancestor. But it wasn't just size. The skull architecture suggested a brain organized differently, with expanded regions that would have supported enhanced memory, spatial reasoning, and possibly even social coordination beyond what we see in modern populations. The morphological features told the story of a species built for a different kind of survival. While Homo sapiens developed graceful features and relied on tools and cooperation, Dragon Man maintained massive brow ridges, powerful jaw muscles, and bone density that could have supported direct physical confrontation with megafauna. They were living tanks with genius-level intelligence. Dragon Man's unique position in the human family tree became clear when geneticists mapped the relationships between all 4 lineages. He wasn't our ancestor, he was our evolutionary cousin. His lineage had been developing independently for so long that by the time modern humans reached Asia, Dragon Man's people were as genetically distinct from us as we are from Neanderthals. But here's where the story gets really wild. The genetic data suggested potential interactions between all 4 lineages in ancient Asia. Dragon Man territories overlapped with early Denisovan populations. Denisovan DNA shows up in regions where Dragon Man fossils are found. Modern Asian populations carry genetic signatures that don't match any single ancestor, but could represent mixing between multiple archaic human species. Ancient Asia wasn't just the homeland of one human lineage. It was a melting pot where multiple human species were encountering each other, competing for resources, and occasionally interbreeding in ways that left permanent marks on the genetic landscape. The missing fossil evidence suddenly made sense. Scientists have been finding fragmentary remains across Asia that don't fit cleanly into any category. Skulls with unusual features, teeth that seem too large or too small, bone fragments that suggest body sizes, and proportions that don't match known human species. Dragonman's discovery suggested these weren't anomalies. They were evidence of multiple unknown lineages still hiding in museum collections and unexplored fossil sites. Modern genetic traces that scientists couldn't explain started falling into place. High-altitude adaptation genes in Tibetan populations that seemed to appear from nowhere. Unusual genetic diversity in Southeast Asian groups that suggested multiple waves of ancient human migration. DNA signatures in Pacific Islander populations that hinted at interbreeding with unknown archaic humans. Dragonman provided a potential source for these mystery genes, a successful, widespread human lineage that had been interacting with other human species across Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. The scientific community struggled to integrate this data into existing models. Textbooks would need to be rewritten. Museum displays would need updating. The simple story of human evolution, modern humans replacing primitive ancestors, was revealed to be completely wrong. What other impossible fossils sitting in storage might actually represent distinct human lineages? How many unknown human species were sharing the planet with our ancestors? The Dragonman discovery opened questions that paleontology wasn't prepared to answer. This discovery forced one unavoidable conclusion about human evolution and our place in it. Dragonman forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about what it means to be fully human. For decades, we've told ourselves a simple story. Modern humans emerged from Africa, spread across the world, and replaced primitive archaic species through superior intelligence and adaptability. Dragonman's genome shatters that narrative completely. The evidence shows human evolution was far more complex than we ever imagined. Multiple intelligent human species weren't just coexisting, they were thriving simultaneously for hundreds of thousands of years. Dragonman's people had larger brains, robust physical adaptations, and sophisticated survival strategies that allowed them to dominate northern Asia while our ancestors were still developing basic tools in Africa. This wasn't a case of advanced humans replacing primitive ones. This was parallel evolution creating multiple versions of intelligence, each adapted to different environments and survival challenges. The possibility of undiscovered lineages hiding in fossil records becomes terrifying when you consider Dragonman's implications. If one completely unknown human species could remain hidden until 2021, how many others are sitting in museum storage, misclassified or ignored? How many fragments labeled as unusual Homo erectus or robust Neanderthal actually represent distinct lineages we've never identified? Modern humans survived, but that doesn't make us the most advanced species. Dragonman's larger brain volume and robust features suggest capabilities that might have exceeded our own in specific environments. We're not the pinnacle of human evolution. We're just the lucky survivors of a much larger evolutionary experiment. Genetic signatures in living populations tell a story we're only beginning to understand. Unassigned DNA in Asian and Oceanian groups might represent mixing with Dragonman descendants. High-altitude adaptations that seem to appear from nowhere could be gifts from extinct human lineages. Our genome carries the ghosts of species we never knew existed. What Dragonman's robust skull and massive brain suggest about cognitive capabilities is both fascinating and humbling. His people weren't struggling primitives. They were sophisticated hunters, tool makers, and survivors who maintained successful populations across vast territories for millennia. Their extinction wasn't inevitable, it was circumstantial. The humbling realization about our place in human evolutionary history hits hard. We're not the chosen species that conquered the world through superior intelligence. We're the survivors of a complex evolutionary lottery where multiple human species competed, interacted, and ultimately disappeared for reasons we're still trying to understand. Future research directions point toward discoveries that could be even more shocking. Advanced DNA extraction techniques are revealing genetic signatures in fossils previously thought to be too degraded for analysis. Unexplored regions of Asia and Africa might contain evidence of human lineages that that make Dragon Man look conventional, the Dragon Man genome has opened a door we can't close. Every new fossil discovery, every genetic analysis, every archaeological excavation now carries the potential to reveal another impossible human lineage that challenges everything we thought we knew about our origins. Dragon Man proves human evolution was a complex web of parallel lineages, not a simple progression toward modern humans. Subscribe for more discoveries that challenge everything we thought we knew about our origins.